Last stop service. Shrine. Shrine of Remembrance. Eternal Flame.
1914, Germany, fearing war on two fronts, hoped to achieve a decisive defeat of the French in the west before Russia could fully mobilize its armies. Germany's Schlieffen Plan called for a strong advance through neutral Belgium towards Paris. Having guaranteed Belgian neutrality, Britain declared war on the 4th of August after the German army crossed the Belgian border. Within a month, the Germans had come within 35 kilometers of Paris, but French and British forces managed to stall the German advance at the River Marne. Both sides then tried to outflank each other in a race to the sea. Each sought to secure access to northern ports on the English Channel and Allied supply lines. By late 1914, after the Battle of Ypres, a stalemate was developing between the opposing armies on the west. Little progress would be made by either side before early 1918. The front line soon stretched for over 700 kilometers from the English Channel to the Swiss border. In 1915, both sides dug in. In the ensuing trench warfare, it was clear that the advantage lay with the defenders, usually the Germans. Attacks sought small gains. Success was counted in meters and achieved at great cost. Territorial gains were secondary objectives in these battles of attrition. In an attempt to bleed France white, Germany struck at the Verdun fortresses, igniting a bloody battle that lasted from February to December 1916. It resulted in 540,000 French casualties, and almost as many German ones. In mid-1916, aiming to draw German troops away from Verdun and hoping to rupture the German front, the British and French launched a huge assault on the Somme. The battle raged for 4 months, but the Allies captured just 200 square kilometers. Early in 1917, the Germans fell back to a new, stronger defensive position, the Hindenburg Line. During Easter 1917, British Empire troops attacked the Germans at Arras, Vimy Ridge, and Bullecourt. They made little progress and at terrible human cost. Simultaneously on the French front, losses were so high they caused mutinies in the army. In April 1917, after Germany resumed unrestricted submarine warfare, the United States declared war. By mid-1917, the British, forced to take a greater role in the war, chose to launch a great offensive from Ypres in Flanders. It resulted in horrendous casualties between July and November. 1917 was the worst year of the war for the Allies, with minimal gains to show for their huge losses. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, the pressure of war caused the collapse of Russia's government. The Russians sued for peace, allowing the transfer of vast numbers of German troops to the Western Front. In the spring of 1918, the Germans launched an all-out offensive on the Somme that drove the Allied armies back, but ultimately failed before the city of Amiens. Further smaller offensives followed, with similar results. By the end of May 1918, there were more than 500,000 American troops on the Western Front, with 10,000 more arriving every day. Time was running out for the Germans. In July, the German army's final offensive was turned back by French and American troops at the Marne. British, French and American forces were now attacking. A decisive blow was struck at the Somme on the 8th of August. Germany's Black Day, as General Ludendorff later described it. Other Allied units broke through the heavily fortified Hindenburg Line. The French were making gains, and the Americans began their Moussagon offensive. German morale was broken. Food shortages on the home front led to political instability, and the Kaiser went into exile. The new German government sought a peace settlement. With the signing of an armistice on the 11th of November 1918, the guns fell silent on the Western Front.
Australia and other Commonwealth countries declared war on Germany after it invaded Poland on the 3rd of September 1939. Australian troops first began arriving in Palestine in January 1940 and began training to prepare for the long campaign they expected to fight in Western Europe. However, after the fall of France in June 1940 and the formation of the pro-German Vichy French regime soon afterwards, the Australians were ordered to remain in the Middle East to protect the Suez Canal. This key waterway connected Britain with its African, Asian and Australasian colonies. 3 Australian formations, the 6th, 7th and 9th Divisions, would see service in the Middle East. Troops of 6th Division were first to see action. Between January and February 1941, they won a succession of brilliant victories against the Italians in North Africa. But in April, 6th Division were transferred to Greece to help defend that country against an overwhelming German invasion. The 6th was badly mauled during a series of delaying actions. Fighting on the Greek mainland was followed by a valiant but ultimately unsuccessful effort to defend 3 key airfields on the island of Crete against a German airborne invasion in May. In the Greek and Crete campaigns, 1,300 Australians were killed or injured, and more than 4,000 were captured, along with thousands of British and New Zealand troops. Meanwhile, the German Africa Corps arrived in the Libyan capital of Tripoli in February 1941, marking a renewed offensive.
We had a really hard
Giliman theory.
a lot of cases about dancers and men complaining about
walking far into the night, midst the wattle and the gum, fragrant odors seem so near at hand. For the bush is calling me far away up
when given to the shrine in 2004, stimulated interest in uncovering some of the stories behind its signatures and inscriptions. Over 100 people signed the flag between 1942 and 1945. Most of the signatures belong to Australian servicemen who became prisoners of war at the fall of Singapore. It was also signed by some of those who liberated Changi Prison in September 1945. The flag was a symbol of the values and freedom for which the Allies fought, endured, and died during their active service and their captivity. Despite indications that the Japanese had already begun their expansion through the Asia-Pacific region, the Allies were taken by surprise when the Japanese invaded Thailand and Malaya on the 8th of December 1941. Within a period of 48 hours, Japan made further surprise attacks on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, Hong Kong, and other islands in the Pacific. At that time, the Australian 8th Division, positioned to defend Malaya against Japanese invasion, was made up of the 22nd and 27th Brigades. The officer commanding the 8th Australian Division, Lieutenant General Bennett, set up his headquarters at Johor and established friendly terms with the Sultan of Johor. The Sultan generously granted the Australian requests for buildings, campsites, and even sporting facilities. Captain Kenneth Parsons was adjutant of the 2nd 3rd Motor Ambulance Convoy stationed in northern Johor. In the final days of January 1942, Parsons' unit was one of the last to withdraw from the Malayan Peninsula to Singapore. During these dangerous days, Captain Parsons removed a British flag from where it flew over the Sultan of Johor's palace to keep it from falling into the hands of the advancing Japanese army. On the 11th of February 1942, St Andrew's Cathedral was adopted by the 2nd 3rd Motor Ambulance Convoy as their unit headquarters and used as a casualty clearing station by them and all other medical units. Throughout February 1942, the desperate battle for Singapore was fought and ultimately lost. At 11:50 a.m. on the 15th of February, Brigadier Taylor, commander of the 22nd Brigade, wrote in the unit diary, "Owing to the destruction of Singapore, dislocation of the water, sewerage and medical services, and the latter being overtaxed and unable to cope with dead and wounded, humanity demands a cessation of hostilities. A senior officer of the Malaya Command has left at 11 o'clock to discuss with the Japanese an armistice." Taylor continued that he had instructed that no man would leave his post or attempt to escape. Australia, he said, had been informed of the gallant fighting by the AIF in Malaya, and they were proud of them. "If we become prisoners of war, our heads could be held high, with no discredit of having laid down our arms for humanitarian reasons." Brigadier Taylor summarized his thoughts on the reasons for the success of the Japanese invasion of Malaya. "Nothing slowed Japs much. Broken bridges, swamps, mountains were all negotiated with speed. They lived on what they carried with them and on the land. One Jap company commander said his unit advanced for 42 days without an issue of rations. Japs were well trained, fit, and had first-class morale, and no shortage of troops who would sacrifice themselves to try out a position." Almost 15,000 Australian servicemen and women were captured when the Allies surrendered. Neither the Allies nor their captors knew much of one another's customs, traditions, attitudes, or languages. 2 days after the Allied surrender, the prisoners were marched to Changi, among them Captain Parsons carrying the flag that has now come to prominence. The flag remained in Changi prison for the 3.5 years that the Allies were in captivity, a powerful symbol of the values they'd fought for. It was said to have been taken out of its hiding place and been used at funerals and other ceremonial occasions. As prisoners, the Allies were faced with water shortages, damaged buildings, excessive flies, dysentery, and malaria. Their efforts to source sufficient food and nutrients were exceptional, yet the Allies were hungry and undernourished for the duration of their captivity. Rice was the only food supplied by the Japanese. Within 2 months, the Australians had established a communal gardening scheme using every available piece of ground. All native fruits were conserved and ingenious methods of cooking rice were employed to enhance its preparation and edibility. A poultry farm was established in May 1942, from which 40,000 eggs were produced, subsequently distributed according to dietary requirements. Paul Payne of the 2nd 9th Field Ambulance tells the story of the Japanese officer who came to him with a chicken and ordered him to cook it for him. Paul had scooped out a cupful of stock to eat later and hidden it for fear of the consequences if he was discovered. On this occasion, the Japanese officer returned with 2 plates and 2 sets of eating utensils to share the chicken with Paul. As a distraction from their deprivations, the prisoners organised activities such as the Changi Concert Party, an Australian entertainment group that became famous for its professionalism and innovation. Paul Payne, Harry Shurey and Ken Topless, all of the 2nd 9th Field Ambulance, were all members of the concert party who survived to recount their experiences. Paul Payne recently wrote about Old Harry, a popular comedian with the concert party. Whenever Old Harry commenced his act, he would shout, "You'll never get off the island," meaning the island of Singapore. Often the audience would beat him to it and shout his catchphrase before he had a chance to do so. On one occasion, the theatre was packed with a large group of men who had just returned to Changi from the Burma Railway. These men were in a sad and sorry condition, but were ready to join in the fun and entertainment. When Old Harry appeared on the stage, they yelled, "You'll never get off the island." Harry, without a moment's hesitation, replied, "A lot of you bloody clowns were bloody glad to get back on it." It brought the house down. Large numbers of prisoners were moved from Changi to undertake building projects for the Japanese as far away as Japan. The most notorious was the Burma-Thailand Railway. Some 61,000 Allied prisoners worked on the railway, constructed over 421 kilometres through dense jungle and mountainous terrain. It was completed in November 1943 at the cost of 10,000 prisoners' lives and a far greater number of civilians. There are 15 signatures on the flag that belong to men who worked and died on the Burma-Thailand Railway during 1943.
Yeah.